Bertie, you're very welcome. Now, if you want fancy, hit the wee button on the bottom left. Hit the wee follow button. Go on, you want to. You know you want to. Go on, you want to. Hit the wee button, will ye? Now, it's Sunday, the 19th of May, 2024, which means it is time for... Wankers of the Week. Yes, time for Wankers of the Week. And this week, the prestigious award goes to our local politicians and their incompetence during the COVID pandemic, which has been laid bare by the COVID inquiry, which is just finished. Now, take for example, ex-First Minister Arlene Foster. Excuse me, sorry about that. I meant Baroness Arlene Foster. Well, the Baroness deigned to drop back over home from the Big Island to give evidence to the inquiry. Now, it would be unfair, which I try to be fair, to lay all the blame at the feet of the DUP. For if anything, the COVID inquiry has proved beyond doubt that both Sinn Féin and the DUP were equally wanting when it came to managing the pandemic. You see, you're probably like me, and you probably expected that an existential crisis, such as a worldwide pandemic, right, threatening both life and livelihood, would render petty local politics irrelevant and unite our politicians in a common cause. We'd be wrong. What happened, of course, was they retreated to their usual tribal bullshit, resulting in petty bickering and political point scoring. Our present First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, well, she finally admitted that flouting COVID restrictions by attending the Bobby Story funeral was wrong.
I also know that my actions also angered the families, and for that, I'm truly sorry. I am sorry for going, and I'm sorry for the hurt that's been caused after that, and I want to make that statement very clear on the record again today.
Now, just what Sinn Féin was thinking by organising that funeral, well, that sort of remains a mystery. But I do believe Michelle's apology to be both fulsome and genuine. She showed both contrition and emotion in accepting that her attendance at the funeral was a mistake. I would have liked an acknowledgement that the event itself hadn't been a very good idea. There was no reciprocation in humility, however, when it came time for Baroness Foster to answer questions. She appeared both irritated and imperious at being asked about her decision-making during the pandemic.
In office.
What was your responsibility at this time, Baroness Foster?
A wide-ranging responsibility.
No, I mean in respect of the pandemic.
Well, as I've already indicated, we were heavily reliant, probably too heavily reliant on briefings from the Minister of Health in relation to what was happening.
That's not an answer.
Well, it is an answer. It's the answer I'm giving to the inquiry.
I'm asking you what your responsibilities were or how you discharged your responsibilities to Northern Ireland as the leader of its government in respect of the pandemic during that time.
I've already answered that question.
For those of us on this small island, her behaviour didn't come as a surprise. We've seen it all before. During the last inquiry where the Baroness's competency was questioned. That one was called the RHI inquiry. Now, for those of you who don't know about RHI, well, that inquiry related to Renewable Heat Initiative, RHI, which was supposed to offer a more environmentally sustainable energy source in Northern Ireland. The scheme was managed and set up around 2012 by the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Investment, known as DETI. And guess who the minister in charge of that department was at the time? Drum roll! You're right. Baroness Foster. The scheme, while well-intentioned, had one wee small problem. Namely, that people were paid more in subsidy for burning the wood pellet fuel than the actual fuel, resulting in them turning their boilers to max, resulting in a handsome profit. Such a profit that it's estimated the final cost of the public purse was around 500 million quid. Yes, you heard me right. A scheme to cut fossil fuel emissions ended with an increase in those emissions at a cost of 500 million to the public purse. Think how much good that could have done in the health or education sector. When Baroness Foster faced criticism at the RHI inquiry for her lamentable handling of the scheme, she hit back saying that as Minister of Deputy at the time, she couldn't be expected to be over every single jot and tittle of policy in her department. No, sorry. But when those jot and tittles end up costing 550 million, most reasonable people would have expected her to be over her brief. That crisis, of course, directly led to the collapse of the Assembly for 3 years when the Shinners took their ball and went home. But the Baroness was still in position when the Assembly reconvened, and now on a roll, she followed up on the RHI debacle by being duped by Boris Johnson. For like Tory leaders for hundreds of years, Boris played the stupid Paddy, conning her into supporting his hard Brexit by promising hand on heart there would never be a border between United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. As soon as he gained a majority in the Commons, however, he threw the gullible Baroness onto the Brexit bus, resulting in the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Irish Sea border. Now, when the full ramifications of this disaster hit home within the DUP, they promptly dumped Arlene as their leader. But she didn't have to get depressed, as she immediately moved from the Commons to the Lords as Baroness of Ahradrumsea. No real surprise, as the Lords has always been a safety net for conmen, tax dodgers, and failed politicians such as Baroness Foster. She followed her elevation by surrendering what little dignity she retained and by joining GB News and the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nigel Farage, where she hosts her own show. Oh, important news stories does Arlene do. Such as the 12th of July celebrations, because they're no longer covered by BBC Northern Ireland. You know what takes your breath away? It's the complete lack of shame or embarrassment from the likes of the Baroness. You know, her sense of entitlement and hubris knows no bounds. This is the best one. Most recently, she's been offered the role of chairperson of Intertrade UK, a body which promotes trade within the UK. So, I love the symmetry here. The person responsible for the Northern Ireland Protocol resulting in the Irish Sea border, leading the friction and trade between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK, is now to front the body responsible for dealing with the issues resulting from that disaster. It's a funny old world. What Baroness Foster's story proves beyond doubt is there is no such thing as failure if you're lucky enough to be a politician. For having failed as Deputy Minister, then failed as First Minister of Northern Ireland, she was gifted a peerage, a job on GB News, and now a role in Intertrade UK. And for those of you who are going to argue that my assertions about politicians is wrong, I ask you this question. Tell me of any other job in the world, leaving aside religion, of course, take religion out of it, where someone with such a history of abject failure as Baroness Foster would still be employable, much less promotable. I believe Chief Medical Officer at the time of COVID here, Dr. Michael McBride, he captured our reality when he described our politicians at that time as being the enemy within and a bunch of dysfunctional bastards. But you can't end in despair. And thankfully, there was one spot of light. One. And that was the man that Dr. McBride made those comments to. Then Health Minister Robin Swan. Swan comes out of the inquiry with his integrity intact. Indeed, while he may be small in stature, he towers over the political pygmies which surrounded him during that crisis. Robin Swan is the biggest wee man in the country.
That's all, folks.